We thought that in this particular sample, we found pristine extra-lunar material resembled carbonaceous chondrite material. But since we submitted the abstract, we repeated the analysis and could not reproduce the result. Therefore, at the moment, we are not able to publish this result until we clarify whether or not it is somehow compromised with an artifact. So instead, I'm going to talk about a very similar subject. And the presentation is entitled On the Mechanism of Contamination of Lunar Soils by Extra-Lunar Materials Using Stepwise High-Temperature Resolution Isotope Analysis for Nitrogen and Noble Gases. And I am going to talk about this particular graph. So that's the result we recently obtained for one of the Apollo sample. And it is very characteristic picture, and it was obtained before in a number of studies of lunar soils. And it contains a lot of information, and I'm going to talk about it in details. So what is shown here is release pattern of nitrogen and argon in the form of diagrams, and isotope profile for nitrogen in data notation as a line with dots. So first of all, we see large variations in delta 15N for the samples during stepwise heating. And we have a light isotope signature, which is definitely related to the solar wind. Nitrogen, which is known to be very light, but it is not as light as pure solar composition. So only minus 50 per mil compared to minus 400. And mostly nitrogen is isotopically heavier. And there are many sources in the solar system which can supply nitrogen, isotopically heavy nitrogen to the lunar surface, like meteorites, IDPs, or comets. So from this data, we can conclude that solar nitrogen is a minor component. The most abundant component in the sample is non-solar. So it's extra-lunar, from extra-lunar source. And the data, for bulk data for nitrogen to argon ratio confirmed that it is 390 compared to about 39 in pure solar wind. So non-solar component of nitrogen is dominated. So you can see here that release pattern of solar wind argon, which is 100% solar wind, argon 36, and planetary nitrogen, which is almost 100% not from solar wind, are very similar. And previously was suggested how to explain this two different components from different sources have so similar release pattern. And one of the ideas was that reworking and sort of transformation of lunar soils during maturation, agglomerate formation, so that information about original sites where these different components are located is erased. And it is a sort of homogenization. However, from nitrogen variation, as I said, we cannot see any sort of homogenization. So we need something else to explain this. The other important feature of on this plot is release pattern is bimodal. Also previously suggested that it could be a result of existing two different solar wind components, normal low energy solar wind component and high energy component, which is called SEP, solar energetic particles. So if at higher energy ions implanted deeper, and therefore during step heating, they will be released at higher temperature. However, in order to explain this, we need to suggest that the abundance of this SEP component compared to normal solar component so high by many orders of magnitude compared to what we have now in the solar wind. However, people suggested that maybe it is only now, but in the past, this ratio was much higher. So the idea of SAP was very popular in 90s and the beginning of 2000, and until Genesis mission, in which, solar wind particles were collected for 2 years in artificial targets, then returned to Earth, analyzed in the laboratories with high precision. And this data, these results showed that it is not, there is no SAP component. And all the results can be explained by isotopic element fractionation during implantation of solar wind components. So there is only one solar wind component with low energy. So about 1 keV per nucleon for each of different species. So again, we need another explanation for that. This shows a plot for release of xenon and light noble gases, helium and neon. And maybe this gives us a clue how it works, what might be a reasonable explanation for that, for the bimodal release. So we see here that xenon is bimodal released, but helium and neon are not. So what we can suggest, something happened at about 800. And since by 800, light noble gases are completely released, nothing happened to them. But it has only happened to the gases which are released at high temperature. What happened? So the more realistic explanation for that is that bimodal release of noble gases seems to be annealing of structure damaged by solar wind. It is known that this very surface of lunar grains are damaged by solar radiation. depth of about 100 nanometers. And during step-fast heating in the laboratories, we at about 800 annealing process starts, and it's initiated the rest of the gas, which are not released by the temperature, to release at high temperature. That's why we have two peaks. In this connection, it's interesting to compare the data with lunar meteorites. We also analyzed recently here at the Open University. So you see, in this case, nitrogen and argon are released only at high temperature. We don't see low temperature release, as we saw it for lunar soil. And the same for xenon. Here, it's also released only at high temperature. So the reason for that is annealing happened during impact event in which lunar meteorites is produced. So this helium neon is also shifted to the higher temperature, but maybe that's not important. So what is our model for nitrogen and noble gas and argon? So there should be, in order argon and nitrogen release the same way, we need annealing to affect both of them. And since we know that annealing only works only at the distance of about 100 nanometers, it means that nitrogen should be located within this distance from the surface. And so that's the simplest model how it works. So I'm not going to invent here bicycle, but because something like that structure of the surface of lunar soils, grains, was suggested on the basis of other experiments. So this, if this model works, so it means that nitrogen and argon are both surface correlated, and they should be dependent on grain size, their concentration. And here show the correlation between nitrogen and argon, which is definitely surface correlated. So it confirmed that this model works. And the other things to confirm it is whether in the layer where nitrogen is mostly concentrated, can provide a reasonable concentration of nitrogen. And for instance, for 100 ppm in 10 micrometer grain, if all this nitrogen is concentrated in, this red layer, its concentration in the layer will be about 4,000 ppm, which is not unreasonable. It is very difficult to predict which concentration should be, because it's involves very complicated chemistry during evaporation, during condensation on the surfaces. Yeah, so it looks like this model can explain on the experimental data, and that's my summary. Thank you.